Dr. Ta Kim stared at the medical readings on his screen. He blinked twice, then rubbed his eyes. The numbers could not be right. He checked them again. "This is impossible," he said. Dr. Kim worked at a research station that orbited Earth. He was the lead scientist for the Galactic Union in this part of space. For 20 years, he had studied many alien species, but humans confused him the most. Dr. Jia Li walked into the lab. She carried a data tablet in her hand. "Did you see the new results?" she asked. Dr. Kim nodded. "I don't understand how they survived." On the large screen in front of them was a picture of a human ship called the UES Horizon Asterisk. The ship had returned from deep space yesterday. During its journey, it had passed through a radiation storm that should have killed everyone on board. The radiation levels were 5 times higher than what would kill most species in the galaxy. Yet all 50 humans on the ship were alive. Some were sick, but none had died. "We need to report this to the Science Council," Dr. Li said. She had been collecting data on human survival stories for years. At first, the other scientists had not believed her. They thought she made mistakes or exaggerated, but now they had proof that could not be ignored. Dr. Kim pressed a button on his desk. "Computer, call Director 1 of the Galactic Science Council." The large screen changed to show the face of Director 1. He was a tall, thin alien with pale blue skin and large black eyes. "Dr. Kim, Dr. Li, what is so important that you call me directly?" he asked. "Director, we have confirmed another case of extreme human survival," Dr. Kim said. "The UES Horizon Asterisk crew was exposed to lethal radiation. By our standards, all of them should be dead. Instead, they are recovering in their medical bay." Director 1's large eyes blinked slowly. "Show me the data." Dr. Li sent the medical files through the call system. Director 1 read them silently. His expression changed from doubt to surprise. "This matches your previous reports," he said finally, "but with much stronger evidence." "Yes," Dr. Kim said. "And it's not the only case. Humans regularly survive things that would kill any other known species." He showed Director 1 a series of images. A human miner who had survived without food for 30 days when trapped underground. A human child who had fallen from a great height with only minor injuries. A human woman who had been frozen in ice for an hour and then fully recovered. "We need permission to start a formal study," Dr. Li said. "We need to understand how humans can survive these things." Director 1 was quiet for a long moment. "The implications could change our understanding of biology across the galaxy," he said finally. "I will approve your request. What resources do you need?" "We need to expand our station," Dr. Kim said. "And we need more staff, experts in different fields of science." "You will have whatever you need," Director 1 said. "This project is now your top priority. I will call it Project Endurance." After the call ended, Dr. Li turned to Dr. Kim with excitement. "We've been waiting for this chance for years." Dr. Kim nodded. "Now we need to find human volunteers for our tests." 3 weeks later, the research station had changed completely. New labs had been built, new equipment had arrived, and 20 human volunteers had joined the project. They were all healthy adults who had agreed to help with the scientific study. Dr. Kim had also hired 2 new scientists to help with the research. Dr. Han Park was an expert in how different alien bodies worked. Professor Su Yun knew all about how cells could heal and repair themselves. The team met in the main conference room to plan their first tests. "We need to understand what makes humans different at the cellular level," Dr. Kim said. "Why can they survive things that would kill other species?" Professor Yun showed some images on the screen. "Human cells are unique in several ways," she explained. "They can adapt to stress better than any species I've studied." Dr. Park added, "Their bodies can adjust to many different environments. Humans can live in very hot or very cold places. They can survive with different kinds of food and water. Their bodies are surprisingly flexible." Dr. Li had been reviewing the files of their volunteers. "One subject stands out," she said, "Jun Choi. He was a medical worker in the military. 3 years ago, he was trapped under a fallen building for 3 days. He had a hole in his lung and no water, but he survived. Let's start with him, Dr. Kim decided. We'll begin with basic tests and then slowly increase the difficulty. Jun Choi sat in the medical bay while Dr. Lee attached sensors to his chest and head. These will monitor your body's reactions during the tests, she explained. Are you nervous? Jun shook his head. No, I've been through worse than any test you could give me. Dr. Lee raised an eyebrow. You sound very confident. Jun smiled slightly. Humans are hard to kill, Doctor. That's why you're studying us. Right. That's exactly why, Dr. Lee said. Today's test is simple. We want to see how your body handles cold. She led Jun to a special chamber made of clear walls. Inside was a small bench. The temperature will drop slowly, Dr. Lee explained. When it becomes too uncomfortable, just raise your hand and we'll stop the test. Jun nodded and entered the chamber. The door sealed behind him. From the control room, Dr. Kim and the team watched the monitors. As the temperature dropped, they observed Jun's body reactions. His heart rate is steady, Dr. Park noted. Blood pressure normal. The temperature fell to freezing, then below. Jun sat calmly on the bench. Frost began to form on the walls of the chamber. -20 degrees now, Professor Yoon said. Most species would be in severe distress. Jun showed no signs of serious discomfort. He rubbed his hands together occasionally but seemed relaxed. Look at his cellular activity. Professor Yoon pointed to one of the screens. His cells are adjusting to preserve heat. They're changing their behavior to protect his vital organs. -30 degrees, Dr. Lee announced. This is the failure point for most environmental suits. Finally, at -40 degrees, Jun raised his hand. Dr. Kim immediately ended the test, and warm air flowed into the chamber. When Jun came out, his skin was pale, and he shivered slightly, but he could walk and talk normally. How do you feel? Dr. Kim asked. Cold, Jun said with a small smile. But fine otherwise. The scientists looked at each other in amazement. No other known intelligent species could endure that temperature without protective gear, Dr. Park said quietly. Over the next few days, they ran more tests. They exposed Jun and the other volunteers to heat, to pressure changes, and to simulated high gravity. In every test, the humans performed far beyond what should have been possible. Dr. Kim worked late into the night, reviewing the results. Dr. Lee found him still in the lab when she arrived the next morning. Did you sleep at all? She asked. Dr. Kim shook his head. I think I've found something, he said. He pointed to microscope images on his screen. Look at how the human cells behave under stress. Dr. Lee leaned closer. The images showed cells changing their structure, forming new connections, and adapting to hostile conditions. It's as if they refuse to die, Dr. Kim said. When damaged, instead of shutting down like normal cells, they find new ways to function. Could this explain why humans can survive so many things that would kill other species? Dr. Lee asked. I think it's part of the answer, Dr. Kim said. But not all of it. We need to dig deeper. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message. Director 1 was calling again. Dr. Kim, we have a situation, the director said when his face appeared on the screen. His voice was tense. A human trading ship just returned from the outer sectors. The crew was exposed to the void plague. Dr. Kim felt a chill run through him. The void plague was the most deadly disease known in the galaxy. It had wiped out entire planets. No cure existed. No species had ever survived it. All aliens who were on the ship died within hours, Director 1 continued. But the 5 human crew members are still alive after 3 days of infection. Dr. Lee gasped. That's impossible. The void plague has a 100% kill rate. Not for humans, apparently, Director 1 said. I'm sending the ship to your station. Study these humans. Find out why they survive. This could be the most important discovery in medical history. As the call ended, Dr. Kim and Dr. Lee looked at each other. Their project had just become much more urgent. If humans can survive the void plague, Dr. Lee began. Then we need to understand how, Dr. Kim finished. This isn't just scientific curiosity anymore. It could save billions of lives across the galaxy. The ship carrying the humans infected with the void plague arrived at the research station 3 days later. It docked at a special medical bay that was separated from the rest of the station. Dr. Kim and his team wore full protection suits as they greeted the 5 human crew members. To their surprise, the humans walked off the ship on their own. They looked sick, with pale faces and dark circles under their eyes. But they were alive and moving. This was shocking to see. "Welcome to our research station," Dr. Kim said. "I am Dr. Ta Kim. We are amazed that you have survived the void plague." The captain of the crew, a woman named Min Park, gave a weak smile. "We feel terrible, but we're still here. No one has ever survived this disease for more than a few hours," Dr. Lee explained. "You have been infected for almost a week now. Will you help us find out why you are still alive?" Dr. Kim asked. It could save many lives across the galaxy. The 5 crew members agreed to join the study. They were moved to special rooms where they could be monitored around the clock. Dr. Park took blood samples from each of them. Professor Yoon began to study these samples immediately. "This is extraordinary," she said as she looked at the blood cells under a powerful microscope. "The void plague virus is still in their bodies, but it's not destroying cells at the normal rate. Something is slowing it down." "What could do that?" Dr. Lee asked. "I'm not sure yet," Professor Yoon admitted, "but their immune systems are fighting in a way I've never seen before." Meanwhile, Dr. Kim continued the regular tests with Jun Choi and the other volunteers. Today, they were testing how humans responded to different atmospheres. Jun entered a sealed chamber that could change its air composition. Dr. Kim spoke to him through a communication system. "We're going to reduce the oxygen level slowly," he explained. "Just like before. Signal if you need us to stop." Jun nodded. The test began. Most species in the galaxy needed similar amounts of oxygen to breathe. If levels dropped too low, they would quickly fall unconscious and die. "Oxygen at 15%, Dr. Lee announced. This was already below what many species needed. Jun's breathing increased slightly, but he remained alert. "Oxygen at 10%, Dr. Lee continued. Now Jun was breathing hard. His heart rate increased, but he was still conscious and functioning. "Oxygen at 7%, Dr. Lee said with disbelief. Jun was now sitting on the floor of the chamber. His movements were slow, but he was still awake and aware. He gave a thumbs-up sign to show he could continue. "Most species would be dead by now," Dr. Park whispered. When the oxygen level reached 5%, Jun finally signaled to stop. The chamber was filled with normal air again, and he quickly recovered. "How did you remain conscious at such low oxygen levels?" Dr. Kim asked when Jun came out. Jun shrugged. "It was very hard to think clearly, but I knew I could handle it for a while." Professor Yoon rushed into the lab, her eyes wide with excitement. "You need to see this," she said, holding up a data tablet. "I figured out part of what's happening with the void plague patients." The scientists gathered around to look at her findings. "The human immune system is not just fighting the virus," Professor Yoon explained. "It's learning from it. Their bodies are actually adapting to the virus and changing how they work." "That should be impossible," Dr. Park said. "For any other species, yes. But human cells show this amazing ability to change their function when under extreme stress," Professor Yoon said. "It's like they refuse to follow the normal rules of biology." For the next 2 weeks, the scientists ran more and more difficult tests. They exposed the human volunteers to radiation, toxic gases, extreme pressure, and strange gravity conditions. Each time, the humans survived things that would kill other species. At the same time, the 5 crew members with the void plague were slowly getting better. Their bodies were fighting off the deadliest disease in the galaxy. Dr. Kim worked day and night, trying to understand the pattern behind human survival. He studied the results of all the tests, looking for common factors. One evening, as he was reviewing data in his office, he noticed something interesting. He called Dr. Lee and showed her the readings. "Look at the brain patterns of the humans during the most extreme tests," he said. "Do you see it?" Dr. Lee studied the data. "There's a change in their brain activity right before their bodies adapt to the stress." "Exactly," Dr. Kim said. "It's like their minds are telling their bodies to change, to survive." "That's not how biology is supposed to work," Dr. Lee said. "But what if that's the key?" Dr. Kim asked. "What if human minds can somehow direct their bodies to adapt in ways other species cannot?" They decided to design a new test to explore this idea. They would put Jun Choi in a situation that his body could not possibly survive through normal means. They would see if his mind could somehow help him adapt. The next day, the whole team gathered for this important test. Jun Choi waited in the testing chamber, wearing only light clothing. Dr. Kim explained the test to him. "We are going to create conditions similar to the surface of Taurus 3, a moon with toxic air and extreme cold. No species can survive there without special equipment." Jun looked nervous for the first time. "That sounds challenging." "We will monitor you carefully," Dr. Kim assured him, "and stop the test at the first sign of serious danger. But we want to see how your body responds when pushed beyond normal limits." Jun took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm ready." The test began. The chamber temperature dropped rapidly while the air was replaced with a mix of gases that would be poisonous to most life forms. Jun's vital signs immediately showed distress. His heart raced, and his skin turned blue from the cold and lack of proper oxygen. "His body is in shock," Dr. Park reported, watching the monitors. "We should stop the test." "Wait," Dr. Kim said. "Look at his brain activity." On the screen, they could see that Jun's brain was producing unusual patterns. Areas that controlled basic body functions were showing intense activity. Inside the chamber, Jun had fallen to his knees. His breathing was shallow and painful, but he remained conscious. He closed his eyes, seeming to focus intensely. And then something remarkable happened. The readings from his body began to change. His heart rate stabilized. His cells began to process the toxic gases differently. His skin, while still blue from cold, stopped getting worse. "This is impossible," Dr. Park whispered. "His body is adapting to conditions that should kill him instantly." After 5 minutes, Dr. Kim ended the test. Jun was immediately taken to the medical bay, where he recovered surprisingly quickly. "How did you do that?" Dr. Lee asked him. "How did you survive?" Jun thought about it. "I just refused to give up. I kept telling myself that I could handle it for a few more seconds, and then a few more after that." Dr. Kim shared a look with Dr. Lee. "Your mind was somehow directing your body to adapt." That evening, Dr. Kim called Director 1 to report their findings. "We believe we have found the key to human survival," he said. "It's not just their physical adaptability. It's the connection between their minds and bodies. Their brains can somehow direct their bodies to change and adapt in ways that should be biologically impossible." Director 1 looked impressed. "This could change our understanding of life itself." "There's more," Dr. Kim added. "The humans infected with the Void Plague are recovering. They will be the first beings ever to survive this disease." "This is revolutionary," Director 1 said. "Continue your work. The entire galaxy will be watching." As Dr. Kim ended the call, he felt both excited and uneasy. If humans could survive things that killed other species, what did that mean for the future of the galaxy? Were humans simply tougher than other species, or was there something more special about them? He looked at his notes again. The answer was starting to take shape, but the biggest tests were yet to come. The research station's alarm woke Dr. Kim in the middle of the night. The loud noise made him jump out of bed immediately. He grabbed his communication device. "What's happening?" he asked. "Doctor, come to the containment lab now." Dr. Lee's voice sounded scared. "Something's wrong with the void plague samples." Dr. Kim dressed quickly and ran to the lab. When he arrived, he found Dr. Lee, Professor Yoon, and Dr. Park all staring at a screen. Their faces looked worried. "What is it?" Dr. Kim asked. Professor Yoon pointed to the screen. "Look at the void plague virus samples. They're changing." Dr. Kim looked at the screen. The virus samples had been taken from the recovering human patients. They were kept in special containers that nothing could escape from. But now, the viruses look different than before. "They're mutating," Dr. Lee explained, "but not in a random way. They're changing in response to human biology." Dr. Kim felt a cold fear grow inside him. "Are you saying the virus is learning how to attack humans better?" Professor Yoon nodded. "It's adapting to overcome human defenses. This has never happened before." The team worked through the night, studying the changing virus. By morning, they knew they faced a serious problem. The void plague is evolving to counter human adaptive abilities. Dr. Kim told Director 1 during an emergency call. "It's like the virus is in a race with human survival abilities." Director 1 looked grave. "How dangerous is this?" "Very dangerous," Dr. Kim said. "If the virus learns how to overcome human adaptability, it could become even more deadly than before. And if humans can carry it without dying right away, they could spread it to more worlds." "I'm ordering a complete quarantine of your station," Director 1 decided. "No one leaves until we understand the full danger. Send all your data immediately." After the call ended, Dr. Kim gathered all the staff and volunteers. He explained the situation clearly. "We are now under quarantine. The void plague samples have shown dangerous mutations. We must make sure nothing escapes this station." Min Park, the captain who had survived the void plague, asked, "But we're getting better. Doesn't that mean the danger is passing?" "Your bodies fought off the original form of the virus," Professor Yoon explained, "but it's changing to try again. Your recovery might have pushed the virus to become even more dangerous." The next few days were tense. The team worked constantly to understand the mutating virus. They checked everyone on the station regularly for signs of infection. 3 days into the quarantine, Dr. Park collapsed during a test. His skin turned gray, and he struggled to breathe. "He's infected," Professor Yoon said as they rushed him to the medical bay. The containment must have failed somewhere. Within hours, 2 more non-human scientists showed symptoms. The virus was spreading through the station. Dr. Kim called an emergency meeting. "The virus has escaped containment. We need to check everyone and isolate those who are infected." Tests showed that the virus had somehow gotten into the air system. Almost everyone had been exposed. "How long until symptoms appear?" Jun Choi asked. "For non-humans, less than a day," Dr. Lee said. "For humans, we don't know. Your bodies might fight it longer." By the next morning, every non-human on the station was sick. Some had already died. The humans showed early signs of infection but were still functioning. Dr. Kim, who had taken refuge in an emergency shuttle docked to the station, communicated with the survivors through video. He had sealed himself in the shuttle before being infected. "I'm sending all our data to the Galactic Science Council," he told them. "But we need to learn more about how the virus is changing. We need to find a way to stop it." Jun Choi had taken charge of the human survivors. "We'll help," he said. "Tell us what to do." Under Dr. Kim's guidance, the humans began to study their own infections. They took blood samples from each other and used the lab equipment to analyze them. "The virus is attacking differently in each of us," Jun reported after a day of tests. "It's like it's trying different methods to overcome our defenses." Meanwhile, more of the non-human staff died. The situation grew more desperate. "We need to understand why some of you resist longer than others," Dr. Kim said. "What makes certain humans more adaptable?" Jun and the others ran more tests on themselves. They compared their blood, their brain patterns, and their cellular responses. "I think I see a pattern," Jun said on the 5th day. The virus attacks faster when we feel afraid or stressed. When we stay calm and focused, our bodies seem to fight better. This matched what Dr. Kim had suspected. Your mental state affects your physical resistance, he said. Can you test this? Jun designed a simple experiment. Half the humans would meditate and focus on healing thoughts. The other half would not. They would compare how the virus progressed in each group. After 24 hours, the results were clear. Those who had focused their minds showed significantly slower disease progression. It's like our bodies follow what our minds believe, Jun explained to Dr. Kim. When we truly believe we can fight the virus, our cells actually do it better. This discovery gave them hope, but the situation on the station was still dire. All the non-humans had died. The humans were getting sicker by the hour. Dr. Kim worked frantically in the shuttle, analyzing the data the humans sent him. He searched for a way to help them. I think I understand what makes humans special now, he told them during a video call. His face looked tired from lack of sleep. Your evolution on Earth made you different from any other species. How? Jun asked. His voice was weak. The disease was progressing. Earth has more environmental changes and challenges than most worlds, Dr. Kim explained. You evolved not just to survive specific conditions, but to adapt to constant change. And somewhere along the way, your minds gained the ability to direct that adaptation. Can this knowledge help us now? Min Park asked. Her face was pale, and she coughed between words. Yes, Dr. Kim said. I think I can create a treatment based on your own adaptive responses. But I need more data on how your cells are fighting the virus. The humans gathered their remaining strength. They collected more samples and ran more tests. They sent everything to Dr. Kim. In the shuttle, Dr. Kim worked without rest. He studied how human cells changed to fight the virus. He noticed that each person's cells found different ways to attack the virus. If he could combine these approaches, he might create a treatment that the virus couldn't adapt to. After 2 days of non-stop work, Dr. Kim had a breakthrough. He called the survivors, who had grown weaker. I've created a potential treatment, he told them. It uses the combined adaptive responses from all of you. The virus can't mutate fast enough to counter all these approaches at once. How do we get it? Jun asked. Only 7 humans were still alive. I've sent the formula to the lab computer, Dr. Kim said. Can any of you still operate the medical synthesizer? Jun nodded weakly. I think so. Dr. Kim watched anxiously through the video as Jun dragged himself to the lab. Following Dr. Kim's instructions, Jun programmed the synthesizer to create the treatment. It will take 6 hours to produce enough for everyone, Dr. Kim warned. Can you hold on that long? Jun looked at the other survivors. They were all very sick now. Some could barely stay conscious. We have to, he said simply. We'll keep fighting until then. As the synthesizer worked, Dr. Kim continued to monitor the humans. Their condition was getting worse by the hour, but none of them died. They refused to give up. Dr. Kim realized he was witnessing the very thing that made humans special, their absolute refusal to accept death, even when it seemed certain. The 6 hours that followed were the longest in Dr. Kim's life. He watched through the video screen as the human survivors fought to stay alive. They took turns keeping each other awake and conscious. Jun Choi checked the synthesizer every 30 minutes. The machine worked slowly, building the complex treatment molecule by molecule. 3 more hours, Jun told the others at one point. His voice was very weak. Min Park, who could no longer stand, lay on a medical bed nearby. Tell us a story, she said. Keep our minds working. Jun thought for a moment. When I was a child, my grandmother told me about our family history. Our ancestors survived many hard times. During a great war, my great-grandfather went without food for 2 weeks while hiding from enemies. He should have died, but he lived. When asked how he survived, he said, I decided not to die that day. And then I decided again the next day. Dr. Kim listened carefully to this story. It matched what he had observed about humans. They made a choice to survive, and somehow their bodies followed this choice. We come from tough people, Jun continued. We can do this. The other survivors nodded weakly. They shared their own stories of human endurance. Each tale seemed impossible, yet Dr. Kim knew they were true. Humans had survived things that defied scientific explanation. Hour by hour, the humans grew weaker. Their skin turned gray. Their breathing became difficult, but they held on. When the synthesizer finally beeped to signal it was done, Jun could barely walk. He crawled to the machine and removed the container of treatment. "It's ready," he said. Dr. Kim explained how to administer the treatment. Each person needs one injection. The treatment contains elements from all your adaptive responses combined. Jun's hands shook as he prepared the first injection. He gave it to Min Park, whose condition was the worst. Then he injected each of the others. He saved the last dose for himself. For one terrible hour, nothing seemed to change. The humans continued to grow weaker. Dr. Kim feared his treatment had failed. Then Min Park's color began to improve slightly. Her breathing became more regular. One by one, the other humans showed small signs of recovery. "It's working," Dr. Kim said, relief filling his voice. "The treatment is working." Over the next 12 hours, the humans slowly recovered. The treatment had stopped the virus from adapting further and had given their bodies the tools to fight back effectively. When they were strong enough to talk, Dr. Kim called a meeting to discuss what they had learned. "What we have discovered changes our understanding of life in the galaxy," he said. "Humans have a unique quality that makes them different from all other known species." "What is it exactly?" Jun asked. "Two things working together," Dr. Kim explained. "First, your cells have an unusual ability to adapt and change their function when under extreme stress. Second, and more importantly, your minds can somehow direct this adaptation. Your belief that you can survive actually helps your body find ways to do it." "Is that really so special?" Min Park asked. "Don't all living things try to survive?" "They do," Dr. Kim agreed. "But they follow the biological rules of their species. When conditions go beyond what their biology can handle, they die. Humans are different. You refuse to accept biological limitations. Your minds push your bodies past what should be possible." "So we're stubborn," Jun said with a small smile. "Remarkably so," Dr. Kim said. "And this stubbornness works at a cellular level. It's as if your cells don't know when they should stop functioning. They keep trying to adapt, even in conditions where they should simply fail." 1 month later, the quarantine was finally lifted. All the humans had fully recovered. More importantly, Dr. Kim's treatment had been produced in large quantities and distributed to worlds affected by the Void Plague. Millions of lives had been saved. The Galactic Science Council called a special meeting to discuss the findings from Project Endurance. Scientists from across the galaxy gathered to hear Dr. Kim's presentation. "What we learned from studying humans has changed our understanding of biology forever," Dr. Kim told the large audience. "Humans represent a new kind of adaptive life form, one that can actively direct its own biological responses through mental determination." Director 1 asked, "Does this mean humans are superior to other species?" "Not superior," Dr. Kim clarified. "Just different. They evolved on a world with constantly changing conditions. This gave them flexibility that other species don't have. But they still have limitations. Can other species learn this ability?" another scientist asked. "We're studying that now," Dr. Kim said. "We believe certain mental techniques might help other species improve their adaptive responses, but humans have millions of years of evolution supporting their abilities. It won't be easy to match that." The council voted to create a new research center dedicated to studying human adaptability. They named it the Human Resilience Institute. Jun Choi was appointed as the first human director, working alongside Dr. Kim. 3 years later, Dr. Kim and Jun stood on the observation deck of the much-expanded research station. They watched as ships arrived from across the galaxy, bringing scientists and students eager to learn about human resilience. I never expected to become famous for almost dying, Jun said with a laugh. You changed how the galaxy understands life, Dr. Kim replied. Because of what we learned from you and the other survivors, we've developed new treatments for dozens of diseases. We've improved survival gear for harsh environments. We've even begun to understand how consciousness itself affects physical biology. Jun nodded. But you still haven't answered the first question that started all this research. Why are humans practically unkillable? Dr. Kim thought about this for a moment. I think the answer is both simple and complex. The simple answer is that humans refuse to die when biology says they should. The complex answer involves how your minds and bodies work together in ways we're still discovering. We're not actually unkillable, Jun pointed out. We do die eventually. True, Dr. Kim agreed. But you survive things that should kill you instantly. And now we know why. Your cells don't accept death as inevitable. They keep trying to adapt, to change, to find new ways to function. And your minds drive this process. When a human decides to survive, their entire biology works to make that decision a reality. They looked out at the stars together. Since humans had joined the galactic community, they had begun to change it in many ways. Human medical workers could survive in disaster zones where other species couldn't go. Human explorers could adapt to new worlds more quickly. Human scientists brought fresh perspectives to old problems. The most important thing we discovered, Dr. Kim said, is that life is more flexible than we thought. Biology isn't just about fixed rules. Sometimes, life can decide to break those rules. And that's why humans are so hard to kill, Jun added. We don't always believe the rules apply to us. Dr. Kim smiled. Exactly. And that stubborn belief has saved countless lives, including your own. Below them, in the labs of the station, new research continued. Scientists studied how human mental techniques could be taught to other species. They explored the limits of human adaptability. They sought to understand the deep connection between mind and body that made humans so resilient. And across the galaxy, the stories spread of the strange, soft-skinned beings who refused to die when all logic said they should. Humans weren't the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced species, but they had earned a new reputation. They were the ones you couldn't kill. The ones who survived when survival seemed impossible. The ones who, through sheer determination, could adapt to almost anything the universe threw at them. In the vastness of space, among thousands of alien civilizations, humans had found their special quality. They were, quite simply, too stubborn to die.